Hello and welcome back to Surrey Build Weekly. This week we are going to be talking about the foundation of a loft conversion, otherwise known as the structure. We're going to talk about different lofts and how structures can vary. We're also going to talk about the key points of what makes up a structure of a loft conversion. Here we are at the Mount, which we completed this year. We completed an extension and a loft. Now, any loft will always have to have a structural engineer put together a structural plan prior to building. So once the drawings that have been submitted to planning have been approved, a structural engineer will carry out what's known as the structural calculations. So he will calculate the size of the stills needed in order to ensure that the new loft conversion doesn't put too much strain on the existing property. The structure of a loft will consist of stills. It will also consist of the dormer or the hip-to gable being constructed. We use timber for those. It will also consist of the staircase and the suspended floor, which will sit on top of the stills. The structure happens at the very beginning of any project. So what will happen, the guys will do the strip out, they'll install the stills, they'll then set about building the dormer or the hip to gable, and then finally around week 3 the staircase gets put in. Once the structure of a loft has been complete, building control will need to sign off before we can continue to work on to the next stage, which is of course the first fix, plumbing, electrics and the insulation. The structural works make up for a huge chunk of the cost of the loft conversion. Most lofts will have at least 4 stills, and the cost of stills can vary from say £4,000 right up to £7,000. If there is barn ends, which we have spoken about previously in another episode, we have to include other stills such as crank stills. If a chimney's being removed, there needs to be stills inserted to make sure that any weight that is left above the section being removed is fully supported. Whilst the structural works do make up a huge chunk of the cost of materials in a loft conversion, here at Surrey Build Group we do have our own timber merchants. So we're able to go directly to port and buy our timber, which means that we can pass those cost savings on to our clients. I touched on party wall agreements in episode 27. Now, the structural design of a loft is a huge part of that party wall agreement, because we will, if your property is terraced or semi-detached, insert stills into party walls. So that is a key point to cover when you're doing a party wall agreement. Depending on the type of property you have will depend on the types of stills you need. So for example, if it's a semi-detached 3-bedroom house, it's quite straightforward with the stills, whereas if you are converting a bungalow, we're working to a larger floor area. So it's not always possible to get stills in the span that we need. So sometimes we need to buy stills in 2 and bolt them together. Sometimes we need internal posts to hold the stills up and act as an extra support. Those are the type of builds where we have a little less flexibility when we come to do the design walk around once the stairs are installed, because we do need to think about hiding those posts in walls so that they are nicely tucked away out of sight. If you are thinking of embarking on a project that has more than one aspect, so for example, you're doing a loft conversion and then later on down the line you want to do an extension, it's really important that during the design, all aspects of that build are taken into consideration, particularly with the structural design. If we're adding extra weight to the house with a loft conversion, and later on down the line, the client is planning on removing internal walls or adding extensions, it's key that we make sure that any structural work in the loft is taking into consideration any of those alterations that will happen on the ground floor or the first floor later on. It's important that you appoint a build team that knows their stuffs when there are multiple aspects of a project. So I'll give you an example, which was our project in High Road in Byfleet. Obviously, in order to gain the extra space in the loft, we needed to initially build the ground floor extension on the end of the property. So that had to be done before the structural works in the loft could commence. So when you're appointing your builder, make sure that that builder has expertise and lots of technical knowledge so that they are going to carry out the project in the right order and make sure that the structural works are as per the structural engineer's recommendations. So that just about wraps up episode 31 of Surrey Build Weekly. We've been talking about the foundation of a loft, otherwise known as the structure. Hope you found it informative. Please like, and if you want to see more, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.